Gather today not as a observer participants in the UNFCCC processes, but as radical youth, youth who refuse to be silenced or commodified. For years now, youth have been paraded as a symbol of hope in the climate space. Yet behind the photo ops banal slots lies about indigenous youth or the dangerous that youth will face. We are just being tokenized. We are witnessing a systematic manipulation and brainwashing of youth participation in this space, when critical voices are diluted, where youth are trained to conform instead of resist, where funding is conditional and directed only towards promoting false solutions. False solutions, as we know, have been pushed like carbon markets, geoengineering, and green capitalism, where youth is instrumentalized to harm and very same communities that we aim to support. We have not been considered subjects of knowledge and we have been denied meaningful participation instead of being empowered as change agents. Youth are being used to legitimize the process that take us from one extractive system to another. We are here. We've always been here and will keep on claiming our spaces with our radical voices and not what institutions want us to say. Today, we sit here as a youth, and this table of negotiations is not enough. Granting seat without a real empowerment of youth is not enough. In the moment of genocide, apartheid, and growing climate crisis, the youth climate movement is being co-opted. We are here to fight that, to create community, to build political education, and to call each other in with care, solidarity, resilience. We decide to convene as the Alliance of Non-Governmental Radical Youth, Angry Alliance. After 2 years in the making, we're ready to launch and welcome all youth aligned with the climate justice movement principles to join us and to make this space yours. We've been building in the bases, but it's time for you all to come and utilize this platform to claim youth spaces in these halls. On July 6th, we will open part membership of application form to join Angry Alliance until August 6th. But for now, we're about to hear from different youth, from different groups about their fights. And I'll now give the floor to Muhammad Usraf from Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy, PICS. You now have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Muhammad Usraf from the Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy. Thank you so much, Hajar Biltaji, and for the honorable panelists for your contribution as youth to our fight against climate justice. I'll make my sort of intervention very brief. Today we meet at the very critical juncture in sort of global politics and geopolitics, but also here in the UNFCCC negotiations, we've seen persistent structural fractures that have been continuously sort of repressing our activities as youth, but also repressing our liberty and agency as people of the world, whether it's on generally negotiation streams on finance, means of implementation, on accountability, but also increasingly on the political space itself. We've seen repression from the Secretariat on how to move forward, how to put pressure on the narrowed agenda items, and how evident it is that although when stakes are at rise, so does the resistance to address these root causes. And one of the things that we as youth must address is the issue of climate justice. We must reset the climate justice narrative to ensure that we are able to walk under sort of, just with one foot, or walk in the same route, same path. We all must acknowledge our different sort of backgrounds and recognize that the path is straight ahead and it's straight for everybody else. Obviously, we all have our own struggles and our own issues in our different regions, but when it comes to our fight here in the United Nations venues, the main issue that remains at hand must always be free speech. If we're unable to share what we have from our different backgrounds, that we're unable to meet on one table. In parallel with the sudden repression is the evolving dialogue, whether it's on Article 2.1c or the ongoing debates on Article 9.1 and 6.2. There's been a lot of sort of struggles with how developing countries have been sort of making their side of the struggle clear, whether it's on the need that we sort of are asking for and demanding a public sort of predictable grant-based climate finance. It's not only a sort of prediction that we are hoping for, it's a legal obligation under the Paris Agreement, and so is calling for an end to the genocide, and so is calling for an end to the siege. Calling to an end of the siege must be first and foremost for any Palestinian, any human rights advocate, and any human, period. And I think until we are unable to really recognize that, and also recognize the inability for us to say so just because of the Secretariat, that is a complete violation of human right, not only on free speech and freedom of expression, but primarily on the fact that when the siege is threatened the most by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, by the convoys, the 1,000 convoys, by people from all over the world trying to push for humanitarian aid in Palestine, in Gaza, through Rafah, in Egypt, the UNFCCC Secretariat, especially on issues of climate change, decide that siege is just prohibited and we cannot talk about it. That is a clear statement from the UNFCCC Secretariat on what their agenda is. And if their agenda is not climate change, I have no clue what it is, but it definitely falls against our own agenda as human rights activists, as Palestinians, as people anti-genocide and anti-repression, anti-siege and occupation. I'll leave my point here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Osrof. Now, I'll hand the floor to Wara Iris Ruiz Condori on behalf of the Indigenous Youth Forum on Climate Change. You may now have the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Wara Ruiz. On behalf of the Indigenous Youth Forum on Climate Change. Good morning. I am a Aymara woman from Bolivia, from Los Andes, and I speak today. We Indigenous youth come to these spaces with a clear message: there is no climate justice without justice for indigenous peoples, and the recognition of our inherent and collective rights as enshrined in the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Here at SB 62, as part of the Indigenous Peoples constituency, we have been affirmed on just transition. There is not just an equitable transition without respecting our rights to free, prior, and informed consent. It is simple greenwashing. Without globally applied rights-based frameworks, this so-called just transition risks repeating the same harmful practices that have brought us to this crisis. That is why we call for real outcomes from this work program, not only technical metrics or state-led priorities, but concrete actions that guarantee rights-based safeguards to protect our territories from harmful activities, including extractive industries. Recognize the rights of indigenous peoples to our lands, waters, territories, and governance systems. Provide direct support for indigenous-led solutions like agroecology, ecosystem restoration, community-based renewable energy, and other knowledge-based practices that our peoples have developed for generations. On Article 6, we also remind parties that decarbonization cannot happen at the cost of dispossession. We will not accept that so-called climate action results in the violation of our rights. Trade policies, energy strategies, and clean technology development must all guided by rights-based just transition principles, or they will simply deepen existing inequalities. On adaptation, indigenous peoples manage over a quarter of the Earth's land surface. Our territories, our knowledge systems, and our governance structures are critical to real, sustainable climate solutions. Yet, we are often excluded from national climate planning processes, from NDCs to NAPs to long-term strategies. Indigenous peoples, including our youth, must have full and effective participation in the updating of national determined contributions and national adaptation plans. On the GGA, we propose a set of additional indicators indispensable for global adaptation efforts. Culture heritage, percentage of indigenous peoples' lands, territories, and resources with legally recognized collective tenure rights. Land tenure security is key for our ability to adapt and be resilient. Planning, number of indigenous peoples-led adaptation plans formally recognized in NAPS. As indigenous youth, we do not come only with demands. We come with proposals, with solutions, bringing our indigenous knowledge our ancestors and communities have built up through our centuries of experience defending life, defending our territories, defending our waters, and building alternatives rooted in justice and care for the planet. We say clearly, no climate justice without indigenous people's rights, without indigenous leadership, without indigenous solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I give the floor to Starlin Candetti Loranzo from Latin American Youth Climate Scholarship. You may have the floor.
Muy buenos días a todas, todos y todes. Mi nombre es Starlin Cadete Liranzo. Soy joven dominicano y formo parte de LAYCS, Latin American Youth Climate Scholarship, que me ha permitido estar hoy en la SB 62, aquí en la CMNUCC. LAYCS es una iniciativa pensada por y para jóvenes latinoamericanos BIPOC, jóvenes negros, indígenas y personas racializadas que históricamente hemos sido excluidos y excluidas de estos espacios de toma de decisión global. LAYCS es un proyecto que trabaja sobre 3 barreras de acceso: lingüística, representativa y técnica, y con eso brinda acompañamiento cercano y herramientas para incidir desde nuestras realidades. Pero también algo que importa, y algo bastante importante, es la confianza en nuestras voces, en nuestras historias, en nuestras capacidades para ser parte activa de estos espacios, no solamente como observadores, sino como juventudes que venimos con agendas, como actores, con posición y con legitimidad. Nuestras voces importan y merecen estar aquí. En mi caso, llego a la SB con una agenda centrada en la participación juvenil, con enfoque de justicia climático e interseccionalidad. Vengo de la República Dominicana, un país insular que forma parte y que vive directamente los efectos de la crisis climática. En nuestros territorios, los fenómenos como huracanes y desplazamiento no son una amenaza futura, son parte de nuestra realidad cotidiana. Pero los fenómenos que enfrentamos no solamente son fenómenos naturales, son el resultado de decisiones políticas. La República Dominicana es una isla que no produce ni el 1% de los gases de efecto invernadero globales. Aportan solo un 0.06% total de CO2 fósil mundial. Pero vivimos en carne propia los efectos del cambio climático. No es una amenaza futura. Antes huracanes como el Franklin y el Fiona, que nos afectaron años pasados, que causaron inundaciones masivas, cortes de luz de aproximado 1,6 millones de personas y pérdidas por más de 471.000 millones de dólares, sin contar las pérdidas humanas. Por eso, seguir las discusiones sobre finanzas climáticas, los mecanismos de pérdidas y daños y la acción para la adaptación climática es vital. Las decisiones que se toman aquí impactan directamente en nuestros países, en si nuestros países tendrán acceso directo a esos recursos, si los recursos son reales o si nuestras comunidades seguirán pagando el costo de una crisis climática que no provocaron. Desde una mirada interseccional entendemos que el cambio climático no nos afecta a todos de forma igual. Quienes somos jóvenes, quienes somos mujeres, quienes somos negros, pobres o pertenecemos a la comunidad LGBTIQ+, enfrentamos barreras diferenciales. Sin embargo, nuestras voces siguen fuera de las mesas de decisión. Por eso es importante estar aquí, seguir construyendo mecanismos para que más juventudes como nosotros puedan incidir en temas de manera real, en espacios de decisiones. No basta con abrir las puertas a unos pocos, necesitamos transformar las estructuras, que la barrera lingüística no sea una limitación para el acceso de juventudes. Agradezco a LICE por el acompañamiento y apostar a una participación juvenil con sentido de formación y compromiso político. Participar no es un privilegio juvenil, es un derecho y nuestra participación es legítima, no decorativa. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Now, I give the floor to Amanda Rossini Martins from People's Climate Diplomacy Program. You may have the floor.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Bom dia. Bom dia a todas, todos presentes. I would like to acknowledge, first of all, my colleagues here today and their demands as well. My name is Amanda Rossini Martins. I'm from Brazil. I'm from Latinas por el Clima y the NGO Empodera Clima. I'm here on behalf of the People's Climate Diplomacy Program to deliver my message from the Global South. Brazil, as COP30 presidency, has been using the word multirão a lot, a term that in our language means a collective effort, people coming together to get something done, especially in the face of hardship. It's a word rooted in community, solidarity, resilience. I come from Rio Grande do Sul, where last year we faced one of the worst climate disasters in our history. Over 2.4 million people affected. More than 180 people died, and 25 are still missing. My community was underwater. I remember the horrific image of my city and my people fighting for their lives, their homes, and their dignity. The COP30 presidency, in its fourth official letter, described this strategy as a moment of multirão. And I quote, "People collectively responded with a chain of multirão initiatives that defied the chaos brought by extreme weather." Let me be clear here. The chaos was not only caused by the weather. It was worse, made deadly by state negligence. And that is not just my opinion. Reports from civil society institutions and even the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights confirm this. Yes, we did a multirão, but it was a multirão for survival, not a success story for you to use. And it cost us lives. You do not get to romanticize our suffering to promote your climate leadership. This last week, as we heard their pledges from Brazil and read Brazil's new letter, floods were hitting my state again. 4 more people have died. The government has still not implemented proper contingency plans. There's still no effective climate action from my state. Still, we are unprepared. Still, they are unprepared. And yet, Brazil presents itself here as a climate leader, while auctioning over 170 fossil fuel blocks, including 42 of them in the mouth of the Amazon. At the same time, in this very space, Brazil pledges and dares to pledge, and I quote, "a transition away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner." Do you call that a multirão for climate action? Is this Brazil's idea of a multirão? I call it a death sentence for us and for all the ecosystems we defend. That's why we pledge phase out fossil fuels, phase in justice. We call for a global just transition mechanism co-created across generations to move from this endless dialogue to concrete implementation. The COP30 presidency says we want a global multirão to mobilize civil society around climate goals. Well, we've already been doing that, all of us here. So it's time for you to take action, states. You need to be part of this multirão as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'll hand the floor now to C. O'Connor on behalf of the Alliance of Non-Governmental Radical Youth.
Hi, I'm C from Angry and from the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. I was first brought into this space when I was 17. I'm now 22. And in those 5 years, I think the most significant progress that I've seen from the institution of the UNFCCC is that that coffee machine downstairs now offers oat milk. But I've seen the people, inside and outside of this space. The word focal point is one you hear a lot in these halls to refer to something very specific, but the term actually means a center, a gathering point. This space, this institution, however much we may struggle against it or wish to be free of it, has become a center for our movements to converge and strategize. But that is because we have made it so. There exists within people's shared experiences of this space something that we call a cop high, the thrill of feeling so close, finally, to the thing that we have been struggling against, to press your face up against the glass and see the people responsible for our people's suffering all over the world, individually responsible for that suffering, up close and in the flesh. At the same time, the unprocessable grief of being able to do nothing about it. Make no mistake, there are young people all over the world who would do anything to be in this room with us today. And our oppressors know this. Often in my time here, I have seen people lured into the COP or the SBs under the pretense of autonomy, of empowerment, by those selling magic beans and pushing endless false solutions to this crisis, and trying to use youth to do so because we are so desperate to access the resources we are constantly denied. The lack of resources, trust, funding, and access afforded to youth and our movements has been leveraged by profiteers and lobbyists for too long now. The way that this institution upholds youth, or the idea of us, is in itself a kind of silencing. Visa denial is a kind of silencing. Lack of funding is a kind of silencing. Multi-year wait lists for accreditation is a kind of silencing. We are constantly being silenced in rooms where men in suits pat themselves on the back for how well they are upholding our right to speak. We will no longer accept it. We will no longer accept it. When we came up with the name for ANGRY, the Alliance of Non-Governmental Radical Youth, I was reflecting on the words of the climate essayist Mary Hegler in an essay she wrote about the stages of her climate grief, where she writes, "And then I moved from depression to anger, and I'm still in anger because in this context, acceptance is bullshit. We do not accept. We will never accept. We're going to stay angry." Thank you.
Thank you so much, C. Now we only have 2 minutes for one question. Sorry. Anyone with questions?
Hi, this is Sen, who is also from the Alliance of Non-Governmental Radical Youth. I had a question to the Latin American Youth Climate Scholarship around the barriers of youth given interpretation and translation services here in the UNFCCC, and how we're in these halls and it's such a limitation when we're really trying to represent youth in all their diversity.
Gracias, tengo un minuto. Bueno, digo que tenemos barrera porque cuando hay espacios que se quiere la participación de juventudes y tenemos brecha lingüística, yo no hablo inglés, solo hablo español. Este espacio no se creó para personas como yo. Gracias al programa de LICE, que tenemos interpretación y tenemos jóvenes de distintas comunidades, países, acceso a este apoyo de LICE, estamos aquí en este espacio. Pero cuando no se piensan en estos aspectos que podrían decirse que son pequeños, pero no lo son, nos están diciendo que nuestra participación no es necesaria o no es real. O sea, queremos mecanismos de participación que garanticen derechos para todas las juventudes. Es cuanto.
Thank you so much. Now, I thank all the panelists and speakers today on behalf of different youth groups. Unfortunately, time is up and we need to leave the room for the next event. Thank you.
Thank you. Qué lindo. for your words.
Thank you.
Pode ser, querido. Eu adoro que vocês fazem papel para todo Latinoamérica. Thank you all. Obrigada. Minha querida. Ai, obrigada. Sei que foi muito doido, porque, tipo, ela falava, tipo, 1 minuto, 10 segundos, e eu, tipo, tava na metade ainda do speech, sabe?
Puedes
Mas
salir porque debemos
Sí,
concluir.
perdón.
Muchas gracias.
Hello.
I think I called it press conference. Yeah, it's a PDF.